What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Adventures in DevOps. I'm actually flying solo today. Warren and Jillian both had conflicts and couldn't be here for the recording, but I do have the CTO and co-founder of Cortex, Ganesh Datta. Ganesh, how are you?
Doing great. Glad to be here.
Awesome, man. Looking forward to it. So Cortex is a platform engineering tool, right?
Yes, we are an internal developer portal.
Right on. Cool. So what decisions did you make in your life that decided that you needed to create an internal developer portal?
It's pretty funny actually. So a lot of things I think led up to this, and maybe a little bit of a ramble here. So I went to UC San Diego, and one of my roommates in college introduced me to another friend of his from high school, who is now my co-founder and CEO, and another one is my co-founder and chief architect at Cortex. So didn't know these guys, and I met him in undergrad. I graduated my undergrad a year early, and I promise this will be all relevant in just a few minutes. I graduated undergrad a year early, started working at LendUp, and it just so happened to work out that they were pulling the first service out of the monolith at the time. So I got to join the team that was pulling the first service out of the monolith. So timing was impeccable. If I joined a year later, if I had graduated on time, I would maybe have been on a different team. I wouldn't have seen that experience. And so it worked out that I was on this team as they were pulling out the first service. And a lot of the learnings that came from that ended up being, I guess, really stemming from pain. Like a lot of spreadsheets, a lot of getting paged at 2 a.m. and it's some Game of Thrones character that you have no idea what the service does, and you're like digging through Confluence and whatnot. And for what it's worth, like we had invested quite a bit in all the tooling and the infrastructure and all this stuff, and so it was like generally pretty decent. It wasn't even like we had ignored the necessary investments for microservice architecture, but we had all this pain. And Anish was working at Uber at the time with my other co-founder and CEO, and we were just grabbing a beer and we were talking about like just stuff at work. And I remember asking him like, hey, you're at Uber, like you guys have so many microservices. How do you solve this? Like, how do you keep track of owners? And he's like, dude, you just Slack people and you just hope for the best. And so all that to say that if I hadn't roomed with the right person in college, and if I hadn't met these two guys and they weren't working at Uber and Twilio, and I hadn't joined the team that was working on the first microservice coming out of the monolith, because I joined at the right time, maybe Cortex wouldn't have happened. And so a lot of things definitely had to go right for us to land on this idea. Maybe I would have ended there in a different path, but things work out for the best. So I promise it would all come together, and I hope it did.
Yeah, for sure. That's cool. Like there was in the 90s, there was this show on PBS called Connections, and I can't remember the host's name, but he would tell like a similar story where every episode was like this series of events over like 200 years, and how it led to like the invention of something that just changed civilization. And it's like, wow, that was a whole lot of steps that could have steered that off course.
Oh my God. Yeah, 100%. I do vaguely remember that show.
Cool. So what are the like big pain points that an internal developer platform, like for someone who doesn't have an IDP, what are the things in their life that would make them say, oh, wow, that's what that would do?
Yeah. So I think our thinking on this has actually changed in the last like 12 to 18 months, and I'll kind of walk you through why. Then when we first started Cortex, it was really just, I don't know what services we have. Ownership of these things is really broken. Let me create a system that we can put all this stuff in so that when there's an incident or something, I know where to go. And I think over the last 4 years, it's really changed quite a bit. And I think over the last 18 months, what we believe is if you have any sort of initiative around engineering excellence, you should be thinking about an IDP. And engineering excellence is a broad phrase, but we define it as the investment in kind of high performance engineering foundations to enable business outcomes. So when you think about any organization that's investing in security or reliability practices or platform practices or making their systems more efficient or trying to move faster. Those are usually like engineering foundations. Like those are things like if you do these things right, you will hopefully be able to build more features better and deliver more innovation or cost reductions or whatever those things are. And I think what's interesting is a lot of organizations have had teams pop up around these kind of goals. And so you have like SRE teams that own reliability, and you have security teams that own security. And if you squint in our organization, you kind of see like engineering excellence as these set of teams that don't really own product outcomes, but own kind of engineering outcomes. And those happen to be our best stakeholders. Like they're the ones that use the IDP in order to drive these outcomes. And so if you have a kind of a service-oriented architecture or some sort of complex software ecosystem, and you are looking to invest in these kind of engineering outcomes, then how can you do that without a system that is designed for that use case? And like the example that I always give is like a CRM. Like any self-respecting sales organization like would not be operating out of a spreadsheet or a bunch of Confluence pages. Like imagine you went to a VP of sales and and they told you, oh yeah, I just keep track of all my accounts and Confluence pages. You would laugh them out of the room. And
Right.
a CRM is their way to codify and methodically track all their accounts and their opportunities and report on things and like make sure their sales organization is following sales practices and all these things. So why is engineering any different? Like that's what we do today. Like we have a bunch of Confluence pages and we like just pray for the best. We have SRE teams and security teams who are trying to drive these best practices, but you don't have a way of methodically doing it. And so IDPs, I think, are meant for organizations that are trying to invest in the engineering foundations to drive those outcomes and do so in a methodical, kind of data-driven way. Those are our best customers, like folks that see engineering and software as a competitive advantage and believe in investing in engineering foundations as a way to drive business outcomes, should have a system that enables that set of practices, broadly speaking. So long-winded answer, but if you're investing in engineering excellence, an IDP is probably part of that journey in some way, shape, or form.
Long-winded answers are okay. We got a whole podcast to fill here.
Absolutely.
No, I like that analogy though. I hadn't heard the CRM analogy before though, and that resonates so well with me because one of my first jobs in tech, IT, software engineering was around CRM because like this was in what was it? I think it was late 90s, early 2000s, and everyone like CRMs back then were like, AI today where everybody was just like pimping it out. But it's true because I think that analogy is just so cool because from my perspective in my day-to-day work, you're always like getting pulled off to take a look at this microservice or that microservice or what's this alert mean? And so the IDP is like a common source of knowledge where you can go see like not only, hey, what is this thing, but where's it running at, and how is it deployed and what other pieces are connected to it.
Exactly. Like, what's really interesting is that every single function in an organization has some sort of system of record, right? Like HR has HRIS systems like Workday, and sales have CRMs, and I guess marketing also uses CRMs, but they also have things like Marketo, and finance has ERP, and then engineering built all these other CRMs, but we didn't really have one ourselves. And it's really interesting because the same things you hear in other functions, like, support ticket comes in. Like imagine if every time a support ticket came in, your support team was like, who owns this account again? Like, what does this account do? What kind of customer are they? And you just kind of pinged each other on Slack or at a Confluence page to do that. It'd be insane. But like, that's what happens today in engineering is like, hey, I have a question about the payments API. Who do I go to again? Like, who do I talk to about that? Like that is the current state of affairs for most organizations. And so like the fact that every other function, software engineering teams have solved that for everyone else, but we haven't solved it for ourselves is like such a bizarre chicken or the egg problem to me. And, I think the other like best example of this is the fact that most of these other functions use their system of record to drive kind of like purpose-built process for it. And I'll give you an example of this. Like sales teams, they have, med pick or whatever kind of like sales methodology they want to use to drive like quality leads. Like a sales leader will come in and say, hey, I'm not going to treat this as a real deal unless you know what the pain is in this account and you know who the decision maker is and like you've done all this discovery. Until you do that, like I don't even treat this as a real deal. And all that stuff has codified it into the CRM. Like you cannot move a deal forward in its stages unless it has that information, and like that forces the behavior you want. But in engineering, like we don't really have that. Like if you, the best example of this is like production readiness process, right? It's like, hey, you have to follow all these standards and like meet these requirements, and you have to do things a certain way so that when you go to production, like we're not going to waste time being like, where the fuck are the logs? Sorry for my language. Where are the logs for this thing? Or like, like who's on call for this? Like, is there an escalation policy? Like, is there an uptime monitor? Why didn't this go off? Like that's kind of the current state in production readiness process, is like this is a very manual thing. And with SRE teams, you have SRE teams that like will interrogate you before the thing goes to production. Like, have you done all the things you should do? And you're like, yes, I have. Like, trust me. And it's like an honor system thing. And so why is that any different from a sales team kind of like codifying these things in a system? If sales can codify things, why can't the function that codifies things for a living codify those things into a system too? And so like production readiness is a very common thing people do with IDPs, because you have kind of your core catalog with services and ownership and all this metadata. Now that you have that, you can say like, these are the things that I care about from a production readiness process, and I'm going to codify this. I'm going to validate all these things are true, and I will just tell you if you're not meeting those requirements. And so I don't know, the moment we came up with this analogy, it was like suddenly, everything clicked, because every function has the same problems. Like we're just reinventing the wheel. And why do that when we've learned these lessons the hard way over and over again in like every single function? And so I really, really love that analogy.
Yeah, that's cool. It just works so well. You mentioned that like your SRE teams are your biggest advocates of this. What kind of what are the big challenges for them to get that to get like support across the org for that?
Yeah, I would say like our biggest advocates are usually platform engineers, SRE, security, and like developer experience. Though I think developer experience has been generally subsumed by like DevOps platform groups at this point. SRE is a really interesting one because they don't necessarily see an IDP as just a platform, or like the system of record as a platform. Kind of extending this analogy a little bit. It's like your customer success team. They probably don't own the CRM, but they are like major stakeholders. And if they don't have information about your customers, their lives are a lot harder. And so SRE teams are kind of the same, where they just have a very specific pain point, and it's usually around, being the first line of defense during incidents, or running production readiness processes and whatnot. And like, let's say an e-commerce company, for example. We work with a really, really well-known e-commerce company, and every year they run a production readiness process to get ready for Black Friday, because majority of the revenue comes in on Black Friday. And so you can imagine that they probably have some of the best production readiness processes in the world, because you bet their systems are production ready come Black Friday, Cyber Monday. And so your SRE team comes in and they run this entire process around it. So things like load testing and contract testing and monitoring and alerting and logging, and all these things are like, those things have to be ready to go come Black Friday. And so how do they do that today? It's generally a combination of spreadsheets and tracking down service owners and like manual processes around this kind of thing. And you do that year over year over year, and it's just like, and you end up in a state where there's tons of drift, right? And so your SRE team owns the outcome of reliability. So from a CTO perspective or a business perspective, they're the ones that are kind of the single choke point for reliability. If things don't work the way they expect, the first question is like, hey, SRE team, what happened, right? And so it's like they have a vested interest in making sure that reliability practices are codified. And it's not just them. I think SRE is unique in this, like all these kind of core teams I mentioned, like platform and SRE and security, are unique in the sense that they don't really have a direct impact on what other teams do. They're more like influencers in an organization. They can say, these are what the things I need you to be doing, but unless there's a mandate from like a VP of engineering or a CTO, they can't hold other teams accountable, right? It's more like, here's a process that we're going to put in place, and like hopefully you get buy-in from the leadership team to use those as gates. But like that's one of the biggest pain points is that there's the problem of they're being held accountable to a major business outcome, but they don't have the quote unquote power to enforce that across their peer groups, and so they're kind of in this weird situation. And so I think that's why they love IDPs, is because now they can codify this requirement in a systematic way. So they use the catalog and they codify their production readiness process, and they can generate reports for leadership. They can, assign action items to developers, and they have a way to like continuously monitor these things. And I think that's the other thing about IDPs is like SRE teams obviously are pushing the idea of like observability and monitoring and all these things. And so if we really care about real-time visibility into those things, why do we treat a process like production readiness as a one and done thing, right? It's like, oh, you check it off and like we'll come back in 6 months, when anything can change in 6 months. I could, blow away my PagerDuty rotation and I would never know that until something went wrong and people are like, oh, why didn't you get paged? Well, my bad. Like I accidentally turn off all the notification settings on this thing. And so why wouldn't you continuously monitor that? And so I think that's one of the reasons why SRE teams are kind of such strong stakeholders, is because they want a methodical, automated way to codify their practices and drive behavior change across the organization using like a system rather than just like an honor process. And then of course having a catalog and ownership and all those things are really important, because when there's an incident, they don't own those services, and their first thing is like, who do I go to? How do I loop in the right people here? And if you don't have a system for that, again, you're like, at here, who owns payments? And you kind of just wait, and so like being able to go to a place that says Ganesh owns payments, and I will wake him up because this is written down somewhere and like validated, so my life is so much better. So SRE teams love IDPs for that reason.
Yeah, the at here message is like the please, and then the at channel is like, okay, this isn't a polite request anymore.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly right.
There's always that big sigh when you get paged and you look at the alert and you're like, wow, I've never even heard of this service before.
Exactly.
This should be fun.
It's just like your heart sinks and it's like, oh my God, what is this thing? Like, this does not sound like a thing that should exist.
Right, yeah.
I will say, I think I was definitely a culprit of this in my last job. I'm a sucker for great microservice names, but I will say, I think over the last few years, most organizations we work with have gotten much better about just naming things what they do. Cortex included for the most part. We definitely have our culprits here and there, but I think it's a lot easier to understand when something is named payment service versus bank emoji or something stupid like that.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember when I first started my career, like for several years, there was this big trend to name all of your servers after like Simpsons characters or Lord of the Rings characters. And so you would get paged in the middle of the night because Homer has crashed. And you're like, this is not helpful information.
that honestly didn't change with microservices. I think like in my last job we named, and again, I thought this was awesome. Like we had our automated like decisioning stack for like credit card decisions and stuff. And it was all named after like espresso, because, you have brewer, which like takes the stuff from espresso and then or the beans and then extracts things out of it. So it was like a feature extraction tool for the machine learning models. I was like, brewer is such a great name for that, and like,
right.
Stuff like that. And like, there was a whole theme around that. And, but now looking back, I'm like, imagining a new engineer joining the team and you're looking at like, what are these like coffee services? Like, what does this have to do with anything? So yeah,
Do we make coffee?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Is that a side business? Like, nope, definitely not.
Cool. So a lot of this paints an organization or steers an organization to a new level of maturity. But what's the entry level of maturity to get started down this path? Like, do you kind of have to have a pretty good grip on where your environment is to start getting benefits from implementing an IDP?
I'm really glad you asked this question, because this question probably comes up like 6 times a week. I mean, I think it's a natural question to ask. It's like, hey, if we're telling folks that, you should be more data driven in the way you operate, then of course the question is, well, my data sucks. So like, where do I start? And It's kind of this chicken or the egg problem, right? It's like, well, do I go back and clean up all my data first, or do I start with an IDP, and then which direction do I go? And my answer is always, if you don't have a system of record, how do you even know if your data is clean? Like, you can sit there scrubbing all day long and you will just never know when you've actually reached a reasonable point. And so, like, the way I think about it is, when you first start, everything, like, to take a famous line, everything is an unknown, right? It's like, you just literally have no idea. Everything is just a black box. And then you put it into a system like, like an IDP and the catalog and all these things. And then you write scorecards and, like, kind of data quality checks around those things. Now, all of a sudden, you may still not know things, but you've turned the unknown unknowns into the known unknowns. Like, hey, I don't really know what the service does, or I don't know where it's deployed, or is this thing even a production service anymore? Or, like, which team owns it and whatnot. And so, like, at least now you know that that thing exists, and you know that you don't know things about it. And then you can start to fill in the gaps with, like, automation or, like, human in the loop processes or whatnot. And so, like, without a system, how do you even know where, like, if you're making any progress against this, or where to go against this? Like, for example, one of the things that we always hear is like, oh, well, first we need to figure out ownership for all of our services, and then we'll ask people, like, to add context about those services and whatnot. And what's really interesting is, we've solved the ownership problem in a really interesting way, where we can use, like, machine learning techniques to determine owners of services. And so that's not really a problem anymore, because we can, like, tell you with, like, a 95% accuracy which team we think owns a given service or repo. But even without that, like, it's probably easier for most organizations to say, these, like, 10 services over here generally make up, like, the payment system of things. And so, like, being able to, like, at least classify repos and services into these buckets then allows you to say, well, not just do I not know anything about these services other than the fact they're in payments, I can start to make more data-informed decisions around where to start collecting that data or cleaning up that data. Like, hey, the payments organization, 60% of their stuff, we have no idea what it is. So you know what? Let's, like, ignore everything else for now. Let's really focus on, like, getting that data in order, because that stuff is really, really critical. And then we'll get to the other stuff. So how do you do that without an IDP? And so that's why, like, with the chicken or the egg thing, I think you have to start with the IDP as a way to, like, codify this stuff and use it as a forcing function to turn the unknown unknowns into the known unknowns, and hopefully eventually the known knowns, and then maybe a long tail of known unknowns. And so that's the kind of way I think about that problem.
Right on. So it's like the difference between knowing I'm screwed and knowing how screwed I am.
Exactly. Exactly. That's exactly right.
Cool. So then you can just kind of, like, almost just create a process where first step is look for this thing, something draws your attention, you look for it in the IDP, and if it's not there, first step is to add it to it.
Exactly. I mean, hopefully the IDP you're using is able to, like, suck in everything. And so it's like, that's kind of what we do, is point us to your tools and we will just suck in as much as we can. So at least we know that those things exist in your world, and then you can start, like, filling in the gaps. So that's kind of where we would start, is like, this thing exists, and we start, like, plugging in the holes in the data, hopefully with automation or, like, a human in the loop. And so you can always go to the IDP and start there, and then kind of jump out into the other tools if you need to.
Right on. So you pointed at, like, your cloud provider and Datadog,
your GitHub, your Datadog, your
okay,
AWS, and all that kind of stuff, and say, like, here's everything we found. Let's suck in as much as we can. So now you have, like, a starting point. Again, kind of turning the unknown unknowns into the known unknowns, and so, like, being able to then kind of query against this and say, you know what, I'm gonna, like, ignore all the things that haven't had a commit in, like, 4 years, like those repos I just don't want. And so you can, like, run a report on that in the IDP and, like, put those aside and then focus on all the other things. And, like, because we all know there's, like, 1,000 repos if you have 1,000 repos, 800 of them are probably random script repos and 200 of them are real. And so, like, how do you start to categorize those things in, like, meaningful ways? And, being like, using the IDPs, like, being able to put things aside and, like, start to focus on things is, like, an interesting way of solving that problem.
If GitHub ever decides to start charging per repo, we're all screwed.
Oh my God. That would be a bad day. Yeah. Most organizations definitely have more repos than people, for better or worse.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, for sure. So from I think it's really easy to sell the story of an IDP to your DevOps and SRE and infrastructure teams. What about to, like, the developers who are building the microservices? What's the incentive for them?
Yeah, that's an important question. I think our thinking around this has kind of changed quite a bit. When IDPs first came around, especially like, the open source framework from Spotify, Backstage and stuff, like they really focused the messaging around developer experience. Like the main thing was just developer experience. And I really think that was a bad framing for IDPs because it focused the entire thing on just developers versus how does it fit into engineering excellence and then then focus that on developers. And, what I mean by that is like developer experience, we kind of see as a subset of engineering excellence, right? So it's like engineering excellence is the alignment of your like general technical strategy to drive business outcomes. And it's like it's the entire life cycle, starting from architecture to incident response to production to security posture and all these things. Like all of that stuff falls under engineering excellence. Then developer experience is kind of a subset of that, which is, we want to optimize the developer's workflow. So tools, documentation, CI, reducing friction, cognitive load, like improving sentiment, all those things kind of like fall under the developer experience bucket, right? And I think to kind of bring in another analogy here, developer experience is kind of like the ergonomic office chair, right? It's like you need it for comfort and productivity, and you need it to not fall apart and have a bad back in like 5 years. You could still probably, write a ton of great code if you were hunched over on sitting in your bed and coding. Like you can still do good work, but you will probably kind of wither away after a couple of years and like not be super productive, and you're going to hate your life and all those things. And so it's like engineering excellence is like the general operational strategy to like, now that I have a chair and people are comfortable, how can I, how can they write code that actually matters for the business and do it in the right way? And so like all that to say, I think when we think about where developers fit in, I think it starts with like, what is the business outcome we care about? So for example, like I mentioned, for the e-commerce company, it's like we want reliability. And for reliability, it's like, okay, well, now the SRE team owns a reliability initiative around engineering excellence, and they want to make sure that any new service that is being deployed to production is following all these practices, including new ones. And so they go and work with the platform team and say like, hey, we want to build a golden path, and we want to incorporate our SRE practices into the golden path that the platform team is building. And so now you have your two central teams working together, and they take that and they deliver it to the developer team, and they say like, hey, like this is our production readiness process. You have to meet all these requirements to go to production. By the way, we also have this really easy starter where if you click a button, we will create a repo for you and bootstrap it all the right things and like register it with Datadog and set up your monitors. And so you can use the starter and get all these things for free, or you can kind of go down your own path, but you will still be held to the same requirements. And so now you've kind of tied the two things together. It's like the seamless developer experience around spinning up a new service or self-serving something is tied to this kind of like outcome that we care about. And so like that's the way we think about where IDPs drive value for developers. So it's like you still have really great developer experiences around, hey, I need to figure out who to talk to when I have a question about a thing. Let me go and ask the catalog. Or I'm trying to spin up a new service. Like, let me just go click this button and like get a new service in 2 minutes versus going and copying 1,000 boilerplate lines and trying to set up things myself. But it's like all baked into this concept of engineering excellence. Like the other examples of this is like that we see with IDPs is things like temporary credentials for database. Like, hey, I need temporary access for some vault, and I need just-in-time credentials. Okay, cool. Like that is a security outcome that we care about, and I could probably do this as like a Jira ticket that I can go and file and like assign it to the security team, and they can review it, and they can send me like a secure link with the credential or something silly like that. Or they can bake that into the IDP and say, hey, click this button, it will notify me when you want this thing, and I will approve it, and you will just get your credentials there. So it's still like in service of security, but the developer experience is awesome, and so why wouldn't developers use it? So it's really around like, I think a lot of IDP initiatives fail, and just general development, like not even IDP, like developer experience initiatives or platform engineering initiatives fail because if you have the mindset of, if we build it, they will come, it never works out. Like you have to be solving a very specific pain and like think about it like a product manager and like drive towards some outcome. And then if you do it the right way, then developers will naturally like, you adopt the capabilities because it is something that they are facing pain with today. And so like that's where I think developers get a lot of value out of the IDP as a whole.
Yeah, and I think there's like so much overlap there for you specifically in that build it and they will come model, because you were the one of the co-founders of Cortex, so you know firsthand, like you've got your employees' salaries on the line to figure out and and decide like, oh, just because I built it doesn't mean they're going to come. So you have to do that marketing, and find out who's using your product and who looked at your product and decided it wasn't for them and why. And I think those same lessons have to be applied internal to the organization as well for a product of this scale to be successful.
That's exactly right. I mean, coming from a technical background, our first iteration of this was literally like, here's a catalog. It solved that, sinking feeling when I got paged at 2 a.m. for a service dinner for a Game of Thrones character. And we put it out there and we're like, why does nobody want this? And it was I don't know, it was such a moment for us because we were just so focused on solving for this one specific pain point that we had to take a step back and think about, well, yes, this pain is hard, but how do we show people the value of this? How do we, make it so obvious that this is the right way of doing things that people will want to adopt it and like maybe overcome friction around it? And like platform engineering or DevOps is no different, right? I mean, we've gone through this time and time again. It's like, oh, we've like rebuilt our CI process and our CI pipeline and here's all these other tools. And you're like, why is nobody using it? Well, it's like, was there any real pain around it? Like, yeah, maybe like the old system sucked, but like is the new system so much better in so many ways that like I will take 6 hours out of my week to migrate my my repos over to this new CI process? Like maybe not. And so like either how do you make it super simple for me to migrate, like a click of a button, maybe in an IDP, or it's so much better, or like I went out and researched with my developer teams and asked them what the pain is, or saw metrics. Like it's not just about I think maybe a hot take, but I think a lot of organizations are overdoing it on the surveys. Like surveys are useful, but if you ask people what their problem is and what the data says, there's generally two very different things. And so like a combination of data and outcomes and surveys and all those things are important. But like, going and talking to your developers, like, hey, what do you do all day? Like, what is your experience on this thing? You have all these requirements from security team. Like, how are you fulfilling those? What does that process look like? What is the pain point for you and all this stuff? And like, then you start to realize like, oh man, like I'm starting to see a theme in this particular part of the process. Like that's where I should really focus. And it's interesting because a lot of platform and DevOps teams have been given this charter, like go figure out developer experience and platform stuff. And that is a product question at the end of the day. Like you have to think like a product manager, but a lot of platform teams or DevOps teams are not assigned a product manager. And so you're expecting these new platform teams to like piece together their like platform skills and like DevOps skills and all these things and like somehow like magically learn product management and all this stuff and like figure out the best platform. And it's like a tall order to ask. I gave a talk about this at reInvent because it's like such an important thing. Like I think platform engineers really need to think about the same way a product manager would do, right? It's like, it's not just, oh, let me just build a really cool product. It's like, what is the point of this product? Like, what does the business care about? What is the outcome that they're trying to drive towards? What is the foundation that we need to build? And how does this platform help us achieve that outcome? Because, I think we see this a lot, like engineering leaders or like, especially non-technical leaders will look at teams like platform teams and DevOps teams like, what is this team doing? Like, what do they do all day? Like, it's easy to point at a product team and say like, yep, they ship 18 features and I know exactly, I saw that in the UI and my sales team is able to sell it. Like the platform team is much harder to like quantify the impact of that. And so being able to tie it to some like bigger business outcome is so important to like get that time and energy and resources to like keep investing in the platform the right way.
For sure. Yeah. And especially like if you try to poll the platform team, like so many of us are just like grumpy and skeptical. So like if you start asking us questions, we're like, what do you want? Where's this going?
Yeah,
just tell me what's broken and I'll go fix it. Otherwise go away.
Exactly. 100%.
Cool. Yeah. So like one of the things that successful startups do really well is fail fast, and there's that quote from Zuckerberg a long time ago, move fast and break things, which I tend to disagree with because, it's like, are we moving fast? Yes. Are we breaking things? Yes. Are those two things related? I have no idea.
Yeah.
You
Yeah,
know, because like
exactly.
I could break something and it may be 6 months before we notice that it's broken. And so I like the term fail fast a lot better because it implies a feedback loop that you're actively trying to make what you're currently working on fail, not something that's been working for 6 months. But anyway, with fail fast, I think that's one of the best ways to figure out what your customers really want quickly. And in the case of an IDP, like the customers are the rest of the engineering org. So, what kind of initiatives can you start with for an IDP that lend you to a fail fast mode of operation?
Yeah, this is something we've learned the hard way over many years of IDP rollouts. I think the most important thing, and this is true for like product, kind of like failing fast. The most important thing about failing fast is to deliver incremental changes, right? Like you don't ship a ginormous thing and spend 6 months building this out and then fail. Like that's not failing fast. It's like try a small thing, generally like move in the direction of the problem I'm trying to solve, see if it works, and then like if it doesn't work, try a different approach. And I think for some reason it gets thrown out the window for a lot of IDP initiatives where like, oh my god, an IDP can do 1,000 things. Let me go do everything. I'm gonna build the catalog. I'm gonna
Right.
build the self-service. I'm gonna like do all these things, and like you're boiling the ocean, and then everything fails. You're like, it must be the IDP, and it's like it's not the IDP. It's like I think that all the things you tried probably didn't work, and so I think that the thing that we generally say is when you're rolling out an IDP, start by taking something that you're already doing and making it better. Like don't try to introduce net new tooling or process or stuff because you're trying to change behavior at that point, and that is really hard. But instead, if you can
Yeah.
take something that people are already doing but is made better by an IDP, that will help you iterate a lot faster. Like, I know we have to do this anyway. I know it sucks. I will iterate against this one thing that I know we are doing and make that better until people tell me it's better, which is a much easier proposition than let me go and invent a whole new thing that we've never done before and then figure out how to make that work, which is like the difference between taking an existing product that is like selling decently well in the market and like iterating on it versus let me go and build a whole new product line that I have no idea if people want this thing and then iterate on it and maybe the entire company falls apart, you know? And so that is how we think about IDPs. And so production readiness is a great example of that because it's like a thing that most organizations do and it's usually pretty painful. And so can you invest in automation and tooling in your IDP to solve that very one thing and solve that for every persona? Like solve it for the SRE team, solve it for developers, solve it for leaders, and everyone's like, yep, I get the point of the IDP and this is so much better than what we were doing before. What else can we do now with the IDP? Or the same thing if you have a very manual like self-service process. If you don't have a self-service golden path process at all, any way, shape, or form, it is probably difficult to start there. But if you have like a semblance of that process, then investing in that can be much better. Only if you can tie it to some sort of business outcome. So you can say like, leadership team is really focused on deploy frequency or more innovation. It's like, okay, well that translates into the self-service thing that developers are already doing. So I'm going to showcase that one thing and iterate on that really rapidly until I show something valuable. So like being able to like take a kind of like a single thread through the entire organization across personas is like the way to fail fast because you're working towards something specific and iterating very quickly against that.
Right on. Cool. And I think it also is just going to give you a sense of control over the implementation as well. You know, because you're just focused on one thing. You're not constantly context switching between 10 different implementations or 10 different major initiatives at the same time.
Exactly. Exactly.
Cool. So what's got you excited about the current state of technology these days?
Oh man, a lot. I think it's I'm glad we are generally over the conversations around what is the kind of cloud technology we all want to use. Like everyone agreeing on Kubernetes is like the standard for the most part is like much easier because at least now we can make it better. So I think that's obviously really exciting. I'm sure 95% of people that come on this podcast probably say AI, which I
Right.
will also say. And for what it's worth, I was quite an AI skeptic for a while, and I think some of the new models, like the reasoning models and stuff, are really really fascinating, and I think we're going to see a lot of really implications around that. But I don't think traditional machine learning techniques are going away either. But I think it's really exciting how much more accessible that has become for a lot of people, ourselves included. The fact that we're using a combination of AI and traditional machine learning techniques for kind of data discovery is really cool. And yeah, I think I guess the last thing I'll mention on a technology perspective, at least from my lens, I think about like organizations more than technology a lot. And I think what's really cool is that organizations, I feel like in the last 5 to 10 years, the way we operate as engineering organizations have matured quite a lot. I think things will keep changing for some time, but it feels like for the most part we've generally stabilized into kind of these different pillars of engineering excellence. And I think platform engineering is here to stay. I think we went through the kind of iterations of cloud infra and DevOps and all these other things, and I think platform engineering is like the right iteration of that process. And I think we're going to see. I think that's why we've seen it kind of subsume developer experience and developer productivity and all these kind of other ancillary functions. I think SRE is here to stay. I think security is obviously here to stay. And so I think we've seen like engineering organizations generally stabilize on like these are the things that we need to invest in order to like enable the outcomes that we care about. And I think that's exciting because now we can start to build like purpose-built capabilities for those functions rather than like trying to figure out like, is this DevOps, is this cloud, is this platform, is this infra, like where does this all fit in? And like I think knowing how the organizations generally interact with each other is like a really powerful thing from a tooling perspective. And tying it back to the CRM analogy from earlier, it's like I think that's why you have so many interesting tools in the sales space. Is like for the most part it's like generally stable. You have your sales reps, you have your sales engineers, you have your account teams, you have your customer success people, your marketing people, and you have like your ops teams. And like generally those teams work together, and like that has been fairly stable for like the last 2 decades. And so you now have a crop of tools that have like made each of those people's lives so much better. So I'm excited for that engineering, and like seeing those organizations stabilize means we're going to see a lot more like really interesting tools, especially with AI. So we're going to see a lot of really interesting like purpose-built tools. So I'm excited for that kind of next iteration of innovation around that from an organizational perspective.
Yeah, for sure. It's like we've actually gotten a good answer about what we do for the business.
Exactly.
Like
Exactly.
because
Yeah.
for such a long time, we were it was just everything about our industry was just a cost center, and if companies could just do away with it completely, they would. And we saw that a lot in the late 90s and early 2000s with outsourcing to India and other countries, because it was just like, okay, it's a cost center, so we want that cost to be as small as possible. And now I feel like we've got a part of it was a learning curve on us in the engineering org. We had to learn what we were doing for the business and how we fit into that part of the business, and then start articulating that. And so I think we got better at that. And I think another interesting analogy that applies to that is like looking at the automotive industry. Whenever they first created automobiles, it was just guys in a shop somewhere building stuff, putting parts together by hand, and then they came up with the assembly line. And then once you had the assembly line, you could start creating industries that fed products into the assembly line, and you had just in time manufacturing and that kind of stuff. So I think it's a very similar pattern that we've seen over the last few decades in engineering. So same pattern, just on a much more accelerated timeline.
Exactly. And I think that analogy works really well because we really saw big improvements in the methodologies and the technology around manufacturing when organizations started to see like the way they manufacture the manufacturing process as a competitive advantage. Right? It was not just like
Yeah.
it was just a thing that we have to do to like to build the damn things. It's like if we do it right and we invest in it, it is actually a competitive advantage. And we see, companies like, Toyota or even Tesla, investing in like automation, really seeing the manufacturing line as a competitive advantage. And I think software is the exact same way. And when we talk about it internally, that's how we talk about it, is like our ideal customer is a software engineering organization, is a company that views software as a competitive advantage. And more organizations see it that way because, like software is in the world, and we've all heard those lines. But if you see software engineering as a competitive advantage, then of course you're going to do everything in your power to make that function as productive and outcome driven as possible. And that lends itself really well to IDPs and platform engineering and all these other things. And so, like, of course, you would invest in the right teams and tools and process to make those teams move as quickly and as efficiently as possible. So, it's been a very interesting transition for that purpose. And like, even you see this with offshore teams. A lot of our customers have offshore teams still in India and things like that. But the way they see those teams has changed drastically. Like, people are constantly flying out to go and visit those teams, and they're building beautiful campuses in India. And like, they see those teams as part of the strategy versus just like, oh, it's just another cost center. So it's like, hey, how do we enable those teams that are 13 hours away from a time zone perspective? How do we help them operate really well and independently, and put in the right processes so that they can move quickly? And again, like, those are those may be things that you would have done if you only saw them as a cost center and like a way to cut costs. But like, the framing of it changes a lot when you think about software as a competitive advantage. Like, the way you invest in the tooling and the platform to let those teams move autonomously and quickly is very, very different. And we're seeing that in a lot of our customers, and it's been really, really cool to see.
Yeah, I think one of the really strong indicators of that shift in philosophy has been some of the companies adopting like a global pay strategy, where they're no longer paying a competitive salary based on where that individual is. They're saying this is a competitive salary no matter where you are in the world, and if you're working at that role in our company, this is the salary you're going to receive regardless of where you live. And I think that's a true that's the company, to use the old phrase, putting their money where their mouth is. That's them saying, yes, we value this position and we're willing to pay for it because of the benefits that we get as an organization.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
So you're in San Diego, right?
I am.
Right on. Such a beautiful town.
I love it. I went to undergrad here. I grew up in the Bay Area,
Okay.
and went to undergrad at UCSD. Moved back to the Bay, worked there for a few years, and then, like everyone else during COVID, I was like, why would I not go back to a sunny, beachy town to work remote? And so moved straight back here.
So is Cortex still remote?
We are. We have people all over the world at this point, and we just opened up an office in New York. 'Cause we have quite a few people out there, but there's no like RTO or anything like that. It's just it's nice to have a place for people to connect and hold customer events and all that kind of stuff. But we have people throughout the U.S., people in Europe, people in APAC, and so on. So definitely a global organization.
Right on. Cool. What do you do, like planned events or get-togethers to bring folks together at regular intervals?
We do. We're very, very intentional about that. So we do 2 all company events where we fly everyone out. So it's actually probably more expensive than just having a couple offices, to be honest. But
Yeah.
The talent arbitrage of hiring remote and like the productivity gains are like so high that I think it's still valuable. And so we will fly everybody out to a single place. So in February we do like our company kickoff for the year and holiday party. So we actually, for that one, we'll fly out everyone's partners or spouses and plus ones for the holiday party, which is
Nice.
really nice to like get to know everyone and like really meet everyone in person. And then we have like 3 days of working sessions and all hands and team bonding activities and all that stuff. So that one's usually in New York, and then we do a second one in the fall. That one's usually in San Diego because the weather's obviously so nice here during that time. So we fly everyone out for that one, and then we do a bunch of like smaller events throughout the year. So like for big project kickoffs, engineering teams will meet up in person, or the sales team does their QBRs in person. We meet at conferences. So there's a lot of opportunities to meet in person. And then obviously like ad hoc things as well. But we are very, very intentional about creating those in-person opportunities, especially because we're remote first.
Yeah, for sure. Like, I think really async communication works best if you do have those in real life get-togethers, because there's a level of bonding that happens in real life that just doesn't happen whenever you're just talking to someone, via DMs or even through video chats. You just there's something about humans that it just doesn't work unless you're standing in close proximity to them.
Exactly. Exactly. Like remote work is made 10 times better after those in-person events. Like getting to know
Yeah.
people and meet in person makes those asynchronous and synchronous online connections just that much better, because you've built like a human bond with that person, um, which is extremely important.
Yeah, yeah, the person is no longer just the Homer Simpson emoji in Slack. It's
Exactly.
it's it's an actual real
Exactly.
human there.
Exactly. Exactly.
Cool. So what are the next big plans for IDPs, just in general, and for you at Cortex?
Yeah, I mean, I think the big thing for us is to kind of keep doubling down on this enduring excellence idea. So, like, how can Cortex be the platform to help organizations achieve a higher level of engineering excellence? And how do we get people kind of thinking about this framing even more as well? Like, most organizations are already doing this, and so like, how do we kind of tie all these things together and help organizations see that outcome? And how do we continue building the product in a way that drives towards those outcomes in many ways? And investing in things like engineering metrics and reporting, investing in developer experience tooling, investing in automation. Yeah, really just helping kind of be that command center for engineering excellence. Like, how do we help the entire organization, all the personas, be better at engineering? Like, that is an important distinction from, I think, what a lot of IDPs make, which are really focused on just developer experience. And so I think doubling down on that from a product strategy perspective is going to be really interesting. I'm excited to see where that goes.
Do you feel like um, you've already picked the low-hanging fruit in the industry, or do you think there's still more easy wins to be had there?
I think there's a lot more, well, not easy wins. I think there are obvious wins, but
Yeah.
technologically complex wins, which we're currently working on that unfortunately can't talk too much about, but hopefully we'll be able to share in a few months. But I'm really, really excited about the possibilities. Like the market, yes, we've been around for 5.5 years now, but in the grand scheme of things, going back to CRMs, CRMs have existed for like 40 years, but sales teams have been doing general bookkeeping for like centuries, probably. Like, there's like the
Right.
classic, that cuneiform tablet from the Sumerian civilization around like the bushels of grain and like the documentation around that, on a clay
Yeah.
tablet. And so, like, I think sales process has existed in some shape or form for like centuries. And so we're kind of like speed running that process with IDPs a little bit. But I think, and so with that framing, the fact that IDPs have been around for like 6 years, and I think we're like the longest standing IDP at this point. But like that's a drop in the bucket. It's like there's like so many more things we can do with IDPs, and I'm really, really excited about the possibilities there.
For sure. You're 6 years into the 3,000 year journey.
Exactly, exactly, exactly,
And we're killing it, man.
exactly. Oh man.
Right on. Well, you'll definitely have to come back on a show whenever you do drop that new feature that you can't talk about now, because I'm interested in that now.
Absolutely. We'll definitely reach out.
Right on. Cool. Cool. So what would be what would be a great first step for someone who's wanting to check out the IDP experience?
Just go to cortex.io. We have a demo on the homepage. You can click around, see what it looks like, and get an idea of it. And we are actually hosting a variety of engineering excellence summits throughout the world. So we have one in New York, one in Boston, one in London, and one in SF. And so those are not like super IDP focused, but really focused on engineering excellence. And so if you're interested in kind of how it all fits in, come through to one of those summits. Meet a lot of other engineering leaders and practitioners. So I'm really excited for those. And of course, IDPCon. We held the first one last year. Massive success. I think we had like 300 people or something close to that turnout in New York. So we're holding it even bigger and better this year. So all things IDPs, not just Cortex, but all things IDPs. IDPCon later this year are probably great examples.
Right on. Is that going to be in New York again?
Yeah, I will.
All right, cool.
We are looking for speakers as well. So
okay, yeah. Is there a CFP form on your website?
There is. I believe it's on IDPCon's website, which is idpcon.com, and there's an apply to speak button. So looking for any and all CFPs for that.
Right on. Cool. So that'd be cool. Check out the conference. Apply to speak. I always encourage people to apply for speaking positions.
It's great opportunities, yeah.
It is. It's scary as hell the first time, but then once you do it, you're like, oh, all right, I get it now.
Exactly, and it's cool talking to other people who get what you're doing and like want to talk more about it as well. Like it's being able to have interesting conversations with practitioners after your talk is like it's always cool.
Yeah, for sure. One of the things for me, because I'm not like a super social person, like I'm just not a social person. But when I started giving conference talks, I did it mostly just as a challenge to myself. But then I found that by being a speaker there, I never had to struggle with what to say to strangers because everyone always had like a question or a comment or some way to start the conversation about the talk that I gave. And it's like, oh, okay, well, that's not near as intimidating or as stressful as I was expecting it to be.
It's a great
I encourage people to do it just for that reason alone. And then it's just great for their career as well. You know, you put it on your resume next time you're applying for a job. Oh yeah, I was a speaker here. And it's just like instant credibility.
It's only good things.
Yeah, for sure. Cool. Well, what do you say we move on to some picks?
Let's do it.
All right, cool. So, this week I'm picking a book that I've just started reading, Plato, 5 Dialogues. And, you know, I'll be honest here. I grew up in Texas in the 70s and 80s, so I don't think anyone's going to be shocked whenever I say I had never read Plato before. Like, I've read the back of a Coors Light can thousands of times, but this is my first time of reading Plato. But
I haven't read it.
It's cool because the book, oddly enough, written by Plato, it's got nothing to do with him. It's mostly about Socrates. And the reason I'm picking it is because I learned that Socrates seems to just be a big fucking troll. Like, he didn't really do any, well, just that he would just engage in arguments with people just for the sake of screwing with them. You know, the one that I read yesterday, he was talking with this guy about the difference between piety and impiety and gets his definition from it and then goes through some different examples and then slowly walks the guy around through to the point where the guy changes his definitions of what those terms mean. He's like, oh, so now you don't know what they mean because now you're saying it's the exact opposite of what you just told me. And it's like, wait a minute. You just trolled him this whole time. Yeah. So Socrates,
the original, just to play devil's advocate guy.
For sure. If he were alive today, he would definitely be canceled.
Oh, man.
So what about you? What do you got for a pick this week?
Ooh, I was trying to think about it the whole conversation, and I actually came up with one. The thing that I've been really kind of focused on recently is sleep quality.
Oh yeah,
it's I know it's been in the zeitgeist for a couple of years with like all the new like high fangled sleeping equipment and all these stuff. But I've started wearing my Apple Watch to sleep and like tracking all my data and all this stuff, and like using this app to like track sleep data and things like that. And it's been really, really interesting to see the effects of things like my dinner time and like working out and all these things on sleep. But to the point about reading, what's really interesting and what I found is more than anything else, reading before bed with like dimming the lights and blocking blue light and all that kind of stuff, but then reading for about 15 minutes has had the highest significant impact on my sleep quality than anything else. And it can be,
No
I
kidding.
mostly read nonfiction, so it's not even like I'm reading just like slop to turn my brain off. Like it's like interesting stuff that I read. But
Got some trashy romance novel.
yeah, exactly. I mean, I'm sure that would work too. But yeah, just like reading for 15 minutes before bed has had the most has the highest impact on my sleep quality as seen in the data, compared to anything else. And it is really, really fascinating. And like, I was a voracious reader growing up, and it's something I've been trying to get back into, just like given time. So it's been a nice thing to just be able to read and like, just get through books and stuff every day. But the impact on sleep has been incredible. Like I don't know, it's even more than like just meditating or like breathing or whatever. It's like reading has had an incredible impact. So you should think about reading that book right before you sleep.
I'm gonna test your theory because like my wife, she's always like using her Apple Watch, and she breaks down her sleep and, does similar to what you're describing here. So I'm going to challenge her to read for 15 minutes and see how that affects
Yeah,
her sleep quality.
I've seen like the highest impact on both my heart rate dip, so like how much lower does my heart rate go and how stable is it throughout the night, as well as REM sleep cycles. Like the amount of REM sleep that I get is noticeably higher. I think the last time I checked was around 14% higher or something like that when I do
Oh, wow.
read at night, and that just like 10 minutes of reading isn't enough. So yeah, so you should be able to see kind of a noticeable impact in the data for it. And so like the top two things have been like eating dinner earlier, so you get like fewer like blood sugar spikes throughout the night, and then
Right.
reading for 10 to 15 minutes before bed have been like the two highest impact things that I have done. Because I know you can do like a lot of things with like cooling mattresses and all these other things, but it's like
Oh,
those
yeah.
are like much more investment oriented, but like these are like
Right.
small things that everyone can do. And so I think like that's been what's really interesting about it, is like very small, what are the most tactical lifestyle changes you can make to see a noticeable improvement in the data. And like these are the things that I think that I found. So it's really, really, really interesting. So hoping to experiment more with this kind of thing going forward.
Yeah, you can drop 15 grand on a cooling mattress or spend 15 minutes reading. Your choice.
Exactly.
Totally up to you.
Exactly. Exactly. Maybe I'll do both. I don't know, but right now
Right.
this is good enough. Yeah.
I've seen the cooling mattresses and I was like, that looks so cool, but
I know.
I just can't.
It's just
I can't.
the technology, the gadget geek in me that like
Right,
attracted
yeah.
to those things. It's like,
Absolutely,
no,
yeah.
I don't need that. I just read a book and it's good enough.
Yeah, especially for me because I feel for guys like you and people like my wife because on a really really bad night, it'll take me like 45 maybe 50 seconds to hit deep sleep from the time I lay down.
Oh man, I am so jealous.
I think it comes. Oh, my camera just died, but I'm still here. I think it comes back to early after I left high school. I joined the military, and on my first, I was in the Navy, and my first trip out to sea, my bunk was right underneath the flight deck on a carrier, and they were
Oh.
doing flight operations the whole time, which is I can't remember how much it weighs, but there's like this huge sled underneath the flight deck, that slings the jets off the
Hmm.
end, and then they have to bring it to a stop before it hits the end of the aircraft carrier for obvious reasons. And so this
Yeah.
thing's like going back and forth over your head the entire time you're down there. And then, they're like, hey, this is your time to sleep. You can sleep or not sleep. It's entirely up to you. So I think that might have set some habits for me that are still working to my
Probably
benefit
helps.
now. Yeah,
Yeah. You could probably sleep through anything now, I bet, huh?
for sure. Yeah, it's weird. I'll sleep through anything unless it's a noise that's not supposed to be there. Like I can sleep through thunderstorms and lightning and wind and trucks driving by.
Hmm.
But the minute that there's a single noise that's not supposed to be there, I'm instantly wide awake.
Interesting. Yeah, your brain is probably kind of wired that way to like, I guess, filter out things that are obvious to you, I guess, as like general background noise, which I guess is generally a good thing. Yeah, I definitely much light sleeper than that.
For sure.
Well, I think about IDPs all day long, so
I've actually read a lot about how much our brain does filter out just to keep from overwhelming our conscious
hmm.
mind. Like someone, I can't remember what the numbers are, but someone had like an actual data rate, and it was like
Oh,
something like,
interesting.
yeah, like two megabits per second is what our consciousness can handle. Our subconscious is filtering out like 40 gig per second or something
Wow.
huge like that.
Huh.
And I was like, well, those are cool numbers. I'm not really sure how you came up with those numbers, but it's
Yeah.
cool. And it had something to do with I was doing research on psychedelics, and then that was like one of the things is like psychedelics, like turn that filter off for a brief period of time because over time your brain
Interesting. Yeah.
learns, oh, this person's not interested in this, so I'm going to filter it all out. But then psychedelics like give you access to the full menu and allow you to say, no, don't filter this out anymore.
Hmm. Interesting. I guess that's an
Yeah,
interesting framing. Yeah. Never really thought
yeah.
about that.
It's been interesting. But anyway, so if people want to get in touch with you, talk more about this kind of stuff, Ganesh, what's the best way?
Add me on LinkedIn or shoot me an email, Ganesh at cortex.io.
All right, awesome. Thank you so much for being on the show. This has been a pleasure to chat with you.
Thanks for having me. Awesome
Yeah,
conversation.
for sure. And definitely let me know when you're ready to talk about the new hidden top secret initiatives on Cortex. Let me know. I want to have you
Absolutely.
back on.
I will drop you a note. Would love to.
All right. Cool. And for everyone listening, thank you guys for listening. Be sure and let me know what you guys want to see on the show, how you like the episode, or anything like that. And I'll see everyone next week.
Thanks for having me.